It started with a text I didn't send. My name is Kevin. I'm 28 years old, living in Columbus, Ohio, and working as an architect for a small firm downtown. 8 months into dating Laura, I still got butterflies when her name lit up my phone. But on that Tuesday afternoon, the screen stayed dark. We had a small argument on Sunday. Nothing explosive. Just me mentioning a weekend trip with my college friends. 2 days in a rented cabin near Hocking Hills. She didn't say much at the time. Just raised her eyebrows and asked, "You didn't think to run that by me first?" I laughed, thinking she was half joking. "It's just a weekend. I haven't seen them in months." She gave me this clipped nod and went back to scrolling on her phone. I thought that was the end of it. It wasn't. By Monday morning, she still hadn't replied to my goodnight text. I called after work, no answer. Left a voicemail, something like, "Hey, just checking in. Hope your day's going okay." I sent a couple more messages on Tuesday. "Are you upset about the trip? Can we talk?" Still nothing. Then I saw her Instagram story. She was at a rooftop bar, laughing with two women I didn't recognize. Someone's birthday, maybe. Then a second post, her holding up a cocktail with a sparkler in it. The caption said, "Girls' nights are therapy." So she was fine, just not with me. I'll admit it, I spiraled. I reread our last text exchange like I was studying for a final. I convinced myself I had been too casual, too dismissive. I should have canceled the trip. I should have said I missed her sooner. I should have noticed her tone, picked up on her vibe, something. By Wednesday night, I was typing apologies I didn't even believe. "I'm really sorry if I came off selfish. I hate that I hurt you. Please talk to me. I'll make it right." She didn't reply. Thursday afternoon, I walked into my apartment, dropped my keys, and slumped onto the couch. I stared at my phone like it owed me something. And then, finally, a message. "Laura. Hey babe, smiley face, how's your week going?" No mention of the silence. No acknowledgement of my panicked messages. Just like she hadn't left me hanging for 4 days. I stared at the screen for a long time. I should have said something then. I should have asked, "Why did you ignore me?" Or was that punishment? But instead, I replied, "Hey, it's been a rough couple days. But it's better now." Because it was. She was back. And I didn't want to risk losing her again. I didn't know it then, but this was the start of a pattern. One I'd spend months trying to navigate, excuse, and eventually survive. Back then, I still thought silence was just space. I didn't realize it was power. After that first time, it didn't happen right away. Maybe 2, 3 weeks went by without incident. We got dinner at her favorite Mexican place. She sent me silly memes before bed. We even spent a Sunday reorganizing her apartment closet, which she insisted was therapeutic. Things felt normal again, better, even. But then it happened again. I had mentioned grabbing a drink with my coworker Matt after work. Nothing major, just a casual happy hour with the team. I even told her I wouldn't stay long. She replied with a simple cool and a thumbs up emoji. That night, I texted her a photo of my nachos, something dumb like, "This is dinner apparently." No response. I followed up with heading home in a few, and later, "Want to talk before bed?" Nothing. The next morning? Still silence. No explanation. No message saying she was busy or tired. Just absence. I started to panic again, just like the first time. The frantic overthinking came roaring back. What had I said? Did I forget to ask how her day went? Did she think I was flirting with someone at the bar? Should I have invited her? She texted back 3 days later, asking if I wanted to help her pick out a rug for her office. No mention of the silence. Like I'd hallucinated the whole thing. And that's when it started to become routine. It didn't matter what the trigger was. Sometimes I'd be late replying to a text, or I'd make a sarcastic joke she didn't laugh at. Once, she went quiet for a full weekend because I forgot to compliment her new nails. Another time, I asked if she wanted to split a bill instead of me covering everything like usual, and she ghosted for 2 days. I began adjusting. Without even realizing it, I started running my plans through a Laura filter in my head. Would this upset her? Would she read this text the wrong way? If I went out with friends, would she feel left out? Or worse, disrespected? I canceled a trip to see my brother in Denver because Laura made an offhand comment about people who run away when things get hard. I stopped sharing my real opinions in conversations, especially when she was venting about work or friends. I didn't want to be seen as unsupportive. I muted certain group chats because a notification from a female friend could trigger one of her moods. I told myself I was being considerate, that I was learning how to love better. But really, I was shrinking. I stopped inviting her to hang out with my friends because I was scared someone might say something she'd take personally. I caught myself rehearsing texts before I sent them, rewording everything to sound extra gentle. I once deleted an Instagram story of me eating wings with two coworkers because I didn't want to rub it in her face that I was happy without her. She never acknowledged any of this. Every time she went quiet, she came back like nothing had happened. She'd send a meme or a random question like, "Do you think I could pull off bangs?" And I would reply immediately, because even though I hated the silence, I hated the not knowing even more. I remember sitting in my car outside her apartment once, hands gripping the steering wheel, wondering how it had gotten this far. I wasn't scared she'd hurt me. Not physically, but I was scared of upsetting her. Scared of saying the wrong thing. Scared of losing her approval. That was the hardest part to admit. I had become a man afraid of his own girlfriend. It was supposed to be an easy lunch. We'd both been swamped that week. Her with a launch for some client's skincare brand. Me juggling zoning approvals for a new project near Worthington. We hadn't seen each other much, so I suggested we meet during our breaks. Nothing fancy. Just grab something quick and sit down together. I picked a little sandwich shop near her co-working space. I'd been there once before with co-workers and remembered they had good BLTs and strong coffee. Laura texted back, "Sounds fine," when I suggested it. But the moment she stepped in the door, I felt something shift. She was wearing oversized sunglasses, even though we were indoors. Her lips were pressed tight. She barely gave me a smile. "You okay?" I asked, standing up as she approached the table. She took a second too long to answer. "Just tired," she muttered, then looked around the place like it personally offended her. "This place is bright." I didn't know what that meant, so I chuckled lightly. "Yeah, they've got those overhead lights. But their turkey pesto's really solid." She stared at me like I'd just suggested we eat off the floor. "Did you really think this place was a good idea?" I blinked. "What do you mean?" She sat down slowly, tugging at her sleeve. I don't know. You really think I'd want to eat here?" I glanced around. The place was clean, busy but not loud. Nothing was wrong with it. "I mean, you said sounds fine." She looked up at me then, and her voice dropped a notch colder. "Yeah, Kevin. That's because I figured you'd pick somewhere that doesn't smell like fryer grease." It hit like a slap. Not the words themselves, but the way she said them, like I should have known better. I kept my voice level. "You could have said something. I would have picked somewhere else." She sighed, like I was missing the point entirely. "You just don't think about these things. You never really consider what I'd like. You go with what's easy for you." I felt myself stiffen. "I'm sorry. I genuinely thought this would be okay. I wasn't trying to disregard you." Laura looked past me out the window, lips pursed. "You never try to. That's kind of the problem." There was a pause, 10 seconds maybe, but it stretched. Then she stood up. "I'm gonna go. I have too much to do today to sit somewhere that makes me feel gross." I stood, too, not even sure why. "Laura, wait. Can we reset this? Go somewhere else." But she was already walking toward the door. "I don't want to pretend everything's fine when you clearly don't get me." She didn't look back. That afternoon, I texted her 3 times. Once to say I was sorry, once to ask if we could talk later, and once just to say I missed her. She didn't respond. No Instagram posts this time, just silence. By the second night, I gave up. Not because I stopped caring, but because I couldn't handle refreshing my messages anymore. On the 4th day, she texted, "Want to grab sushi tonight?" Smiley face. "I'm craving that roll we had last month." That was it. No mention of what happened. No follow-up about the lunch or what she'd said. Just a new scene, new mood, new beginning, on her terms. I said yes, of course. But that night, sitting across from her in a dim corner booth while she gushed about some podcast episode, I felt it for the first time. Not anger exactly, but resentment. Not just at her, but at myself. Because I wasn't relieved that she wanted to see me again. I was just relieved she wasn't mad anymore. And that realization sat in my chest heavier than anything I'd ever eaten. It started with a phone call on a Sunday morning. I was sitting on the floor of my apartment, folding laundry, when Laura called out of the blue. We hadn't seen each other much that week, but I'd learned not to take that personally. Or at least not to say it out loud. "Do you know when your cousin's party is?" she asked. No hello, no softness. "Next Saturday," I said, tossing a t-shirt into the pile. "It's just a backyard thing, nothing big. You can come if you want." There was a pause. 1 second. 2. Then her reply, flat and clipped. "Okay." That one word hit differently. Not curious, not interested, just cold. I sat there, waiting for her to say something else, but she didn't. You don't sound too excited, I said carefully, trying not to sound like I was accusing her of anything. Is something up? She sighed into the phone. Why do you always do that? Do what? Over-explain everything like you're scared I'm gonna explode. It's exhausting. I froze. I just asked if you were okay. Another pause. You can go without me, she said suddenly. Honestly, I think I'd rather stay home. I have a lot to do. That's fine, I said, trying to sound neutral. I just thought I'd check. Then came the worst kind of silence, open-ended. I waited, listening for something more, some closing remark. Instead, I heard her exhale, then the line went dead. She had hung up. No goodbye, no explanation. Just cut off. By now I knew what that meant. The silence had started again. Hours went by. I texted once, "Hey, did I say something wrong?" And then stared at the little delivered check mark like it might turn into a reply. It didn't. The next day passed with nothing. Then another. By Wednesday, I stopped checking my phone every 5 minutes. I just left it on the table, face down. That week I didn't eat much. I went to work, came home, and sat on the couch without turning on the TV. I didn't even tell anyone what was happening. It felt too pathetic. I wasn't even angry. I was just tired. Then on Friday night, her name popped up on my screen. Laura, can we talk? Something in me clenched. I thought it would be a fight. I thought she'd accuse me of being cold or distant or not understanding her. I rehearsed every possible version of the conversation in my head, bracing myself like I was going into an interview I hadn't studied for. But when we sat down across from each other in her living room, she didn't look angry. She looked bored. I think we should break up, she said, like she was canceling a hair appointment. I blinked. Okay. She tilted her head slightly, like she hadn't expected that. That's it. I nodded. Yeah, I think you're right. She looked at me for a long second, like she was trying to figure out if I was bluffing. But I wasn't. Something in me had gone quiet. Not out of shock, but out of relief. I mean, we're clearly not on the same page anymore, she said. We haven't been for a while, I replied. She glanced away, tapping her fingernails against her knee. I thought you'd fight for this. I smiled a little. It wasn't a kind smile. I've been fighting this whole time. There was nothing left to say after that. When I walked out of her apartment that night, I didn't cry. I didn't feel numb or devastated. I just felt lighter, like I'd been carrying something too heavy for too long, and I'd finally set it down. She didn't text again. Neither did I. I didn't realize how tense I'd been until the tension was gone. The days after the breakup were weirdly quiet. Not just outside, but inside my own head. I kept waiting for the panic to hit, the urge to reach out, to fix it. But it never came. Instead, I felt still, like I'd been underwater for too long and finally surfaced. That weekend, I called my old roommate Greg. We hadn't hung out in months, mostly because I'd always canceled last minute to keep Laura from getting upset. Dude, he said when he picked up, are you alive? Yeah, actually more than usual. We grabbed beers that night, sat on his porch until past midnight, talking about nothing important. And it felt incredible. No tension, no walking on eggshells. I didn't have to rehearse what I was going to say. I could just exist. That following Tuesday, I stopped into my favorite used bookstore during lunch. I hadn't been in there since the spring. I picked up a book on modern architecture and was flipping through it when someone tapped my shoulder. Kevin. I turned around and there she was, Eva. It took me a second to place her. She used to hang around Lara's social circle, usually at those rooftop cocktail things I'd half attend. She'd always seemed a little different from the others, less polished, more present. Hey, I said, genuinely surprised. It's been a while. She laughed. You remembered my name. Points for you. We talked in front of the design shelves for 15 minutes. About books, about work. She said she ran her own small floral design business and had just finished a wedding downtown. Nothing about Laura came up. It was like we were just two people bumping into each other, not walking footnotes in someone else's drama. Before she left, she asked if I wanted to grab coffee sometime. No pressure, she said. But you look like you could use some human conversation that doesn't involve passive aggression. I laughed. You have no idea. We met that Friday at a quiet cafe tucked between a laundromat and a yoga studio. She brought a notebook and scribbled flower sketches between sips of espresso. I brought a headache that disappeared halfway through her story about delivering a bouquet to a woman who insisted her cat picked the arrangement. It didn't feel like a date. It felt like oxygen. Over the next few weeks, we started seeing each other more. Always casually, bookstore drop-ins, lunch at food trucks, long walks through the park after her deliveries. She was funny in this easy, dry way. She said what she meant and meant what she said. And she listened, not the nodding while scrolling kind, but actually listened. The strangest part? I didn't have to guess with her. If she was tired, she said so. If something was bothering her, she talked about it. No disappearing acts. No mystery punishment. Just plain, grounded honesty. One night, while we sat on a bench outside a diner, Eva looked at me and said, "You know, you laugh more now than you did when I first saw you in that bookstore." I looked at her for a second before answering. That's because I actually feel like myself again. And I meant it. For the first time in over a year, I wasn't tiptoeing through conversations or rewriting texts to make sure they sounded harmless. I wasn't second-guessing my tone or dreading my phone buzzing. It wasn't that Eva was perfect. She just didn't treat connection like a game. And that alone felt like a revolution. I didn't know where it was all going, and I didn't care. Because whatever it was real. It was honest. And after what I'd been through, that was everything. It had been about a month since Eva and I started spending time together regularly. Nothing official. Nothing rushed. Just quiet, comfortable hours in bookstores, walking trails, or tucked in corners of cafes with mismatched mugs and too many ferns. We didn't label it, and for once, I didn't feel like I needed to. That Saturday, we went to a food festival in German Village. Street tacos, weird artisan sodas, and bands playing on folding chairs under string lights. It felt good to just exist in public without tension. Eva joked about starting a podcast where she reviewed local donuts like they were fine wines. I told her I'd be her underpaid co-host. We were halfway through a shared plate of pierogies when someone called my name. I turned and saw a guy I vaguely recognized. Reed? Ryan? Something like that. He used to work on a project with Laura, back when she was trying to get her consulting business off the ground. He smiled politely, then glanced at Eva, then back at me. We exchanged a few surface-level words. Work, weather, food, and then he was gone. Eva nudged me. Friend of yours? More like one of Lara's old co-workers, I said. She raised an eyebrow. Think we just made the group chat? We laughed about it, but a weird twinge hit my stomach. I knew Laura. I knew how fast word traveled in her circle, especially when it involved anything that could be interpreted as betrayal. 2 days later, it happened. I was at my desk reviewing blueprints when my phone lit up. Laura. I hadn't heard from her since the night she ended things. No texts. No hope you're doing well. Just radio silence. I stared at her name longer than I should have, then answered. Hey, she said. Voice casual. Too casual. Hey. I heard you were at the festival Saturday. Yeah. It was great. Another pause. You were with Eva. It wasn't a question. I was, I said, matching her tone. Another pause. I could practically hear her gears turning. Haven't seen her in forever, she said. Funny how you two ended up hanging out. Small city, I replied, keeping it light. She gave a short laugh, the kind people do when they're not actually amused. I mean, I don't mind, obviously. You're free to be friends with whoever you want. I leaned back in my chair. I know, but it's just a little surprising. I didn't think you'd, move on so fast. I let that hang in the air for a second. We're friends, Laura. That's all. Right, she said quickly. Of course. I was wondering if you'd want to grab dinner sometime. Just us. Catch up. There it was. A flick of the old lure, disguised as something harmless. I paused. I don't think that's a good idea. She didn't respond right away. Then why not? We're adults. We can be friends. I'm not looking to rewind anything. You think I am? She said, her voice rising just slightly. It's not that deep, Kevin. It's just dinner. You ended it. I reminded her gently. And I was okay with that. Still am. You're allowed to have friends. I'm just saying, maybe don't pretend like your motives are pure. I sat up straighter. My motives? Laura, I'm not playing a game. You said we were done, and I respected that. I'm not sneaking around. I'm not trying to prove anything. Well, it doesn't really look that way, does it? She snapped, dropping the casual tone completely. I didn't reply right away. Then I said, you walked away. You don't get to be jealous of how I fill that space. Silence. Then she hung up. I stared at my phone for a while, but I didn't feel shaken like I used to. No anxiety. No guilt. Just a quiet realization. She didn't miss me. She missed controlling the narrative. Whatever I had with Eva, it was built on honesty and ease. Lara had no place in that. And for the first time, I wasn't going to let her in just because she knocked. At first, Eva brushed it off. She messaged me. She said one morning, waving her phone casually over her coffee. Lara, out of nowhere, just asked how I'd been. We were sitting on a park bench, splitting a croissant and watching joggers and dog walkers pass by. I remember how calm Eva looked, like it didn't faze her. Like she hadn't seen this move coming from a mile away. She ever messaged you before? I asked. Nope, not once. Not during college, not after. The only time I ever talked to her was when she needed an extra seat at a launch party. We both laughed at that, but something twisted in my gut. Lara never did anything casually. If she was reaching out now, it wasn't about reconnecting. It wasn't long before the messages kept coming. A random meme one day. We should catch up soon, the next. Then came the carefully disguised landmines. She asked how long we've been hanging out. Eva told me the next week. Said she's happy for us, but her tone was weird. Like possessive. She dumped me. I said, I don't owe her an explanation. Eva nodded. That's what I told her. I thought it would end there. It didn't. 2 days later, Eva showed me a screenshot. It was a wall of text from Lara, claiming she felt uncomfortable with how fast things had moved between us. Said she didn't want to come between anyone, but felt obligated to tell Eva the truth about me. She said you were manipulative. Eva said, scrolling slowly, that you used silence to control her, that you isolated her from her friends. I stared at the screen, stunned. Eva looked up at me. I know it's not true, but it's wild seeing her try to rewrite history. Lara didn't stop. The next message came with emotional seasoning. I just don't want you to get hurt the way I did. Then another. He seems sweet. I get it. But you don't know what he's like when things get difficult. She's not even asking questions anymore. Eva said, tossing her phone on the couch. She's preaching. By the third week, it turned hostile. Lara accused me of using Eva as some kind of revenge trophy. Said I was trying to get back at her by seducing her friends. Her words, not mine. That's when Eva started screenshotting everything. Just in case, she said. Part of me wanted to confront Lara. Call her. Demand answers. But I knew it would be a trap. Any reaction would feed her story. So I stayed silent. And for the first time, my silence wasn't fear. It was choice. She's spiraling. Eva said one night as we closed up our laptops after working side by side at the coffee shop. You set a boundary she didn't expect. She's trying to drag me into the storm you climbed out of. She's not used to people saying no, I said quietly. Nope, Eva replied. And she's definitely not used to someone being happier without her. We didn't stop seeing each other. If anything, things felt clearer, stronger. Lara's noise only confirmed what I already knew. She wasn't trying to fix anything. She was trying to control the story, the optics, the outcome. But Eva wasn't buying it. And neither was I. It was a Thursday night, and I was at a friend's birthday get-together. One of those low-key events where everyone brings cheap wine and someone forgets to bring a lighter for the candles. The music was chill, the jokes were lazy, and I wasn't thinking about Lara. Not even a little. Until Craig pulled me aside near the kitchen island and said, Hey man, can I ask you something kind of random? Craig wasn't exactly a close friend, more like a friend of a friend who always ended up at the same parties. But I nodded. Sure. Did you ever know about that guy Lara was seeing when you two were still together? I blinked. What? Yeah, he said, lowering his voice like we were in a confessional. I only bring it up because I ran into him last week. His name's Alex. They were pretty serious for a while. He said it started when you two were still dating. I just stared at him. I figured you knew, he added quickly. Sorry if I'm stirring anything. He said she dumped you when he was thinking of going exclusive, but then it fell apart. My mouth went dry. I felt like someone had just tipped the ground sideways under me. When was this? Early last year, Craig said. Around the time you two broke up, right? I nodded, but my mind was somewhere else. I barely heard the rest of what he said. Later, walking to my car, the pieces started to click into place. The sudden coldness around New Year's. The way she ended things with such surgical calm. The weird mix of detachment and possessiveness afterward. It wasn't just about control, it was about options. She had one foot already out the door. She didn't want space to heal. She wanted space to see if someone better would stick. And when it didn't work out, she circled back. Not because she missed me, Because I was still standing there. I sat in my parked car for a long time, watching the windshield fog up. I wasn't crying. I wasn't even angry. I just felt hollow. Like I'd been walking around with a story that was never mine to begin with. That weekend, I told Eva. We were walking by the river downtown, wrapped in scarves and holding coffee cups we hadn't touched in 10 minutes. I said, I found out something about Laura. Eva just raised her eyebrows, letting me talk. I told her what Craig had said. About Alex. About the timeline. About everything. When I finished, she didn't look shocked. She kept you as a backup, Eva said softly. I nodded. She didn't want to be with you, but she didn't want anyone else to have you either. Yeah, I said. That's exactly it. Eva shook her head slowly. That explains so much. It does, I said, staring down at the sidewalk. And none of it makes me feel better. She bumped my shoulder gently. Maybe not better, but clearer. And it was. All those moments when Laura went quiet, when she came back like nothing happened, when she tried to poison my friendship with Eva, it all made sense now. She was never confused. She was never trying to work on things. She was just keeping me within reach, just in case. I wasn't her partner. I was her safety net. And now I finally knew. The pain wasn't sharp. It was dull and tired, like an old bruise I'd finally stopped pressing on. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want closure from her. I just wanted to be done carrying the weight of questions that never had honest answers. And I was. Eva and I were back at the bookstore cafe where we first ran into each other. The place with the creaky chairs and the barista who always spelled my name with a C. It felt fitting somehow to be sitting there again. Same corner table, same chipped mug, but everything else was different. I told her everything Craig had shared. About the other guy, about Laura leaving when she thought she had something better lined up. About how I'd been a backup plan without realizing it. Eva didn't flinch. She just stirred her tea and said, yeah, that tracks. That kind of calm validation, no drama, no pity, just honesty, hit harder than I expected. It's wild, I said, running my hand through my hair. All that time I spent blaming myself, walking on eggshells, wondering what I'd done to make her go cold. Turns out, she'd already left the room. Eva leaned forward, resting her chin on her hand. That's the thing about people like her. They need constant attention, but hate giving it. They want loyalty, but don't offer it. They'll twist themselves into a pretzel trying to keep control, even if it means lying to everyone, including themselves. I smiled. You sound like you've done this before. I've known people like her, she said, shrugging. I've been people like her, too. We all have a little mess in us. The difference is whether we face it or shove it onto someone else. That stuck with me. For a long time, I'd looked at my relationship with Laura like a series of isolated moments. The silences, the sudden warmth, the emotional cold shoulders. But when I zoomed out, it was so clear she never wanted a partner. She wanted a mirror. Someone to reflect back what she needed to feel powerful. And the moment I stopped doing that, I became disposable. I told Eva how Laura had tried to spin a new story. How she called me controlling. How she tried to wedge herself into our friendship, then poison it. Eva rolled her eyes. It only made me trust you more. You didn't try to defend yourself. You just kept showing up, calmly, honestly. That tells me everything I need to know. We sat in silence for a bit after that, sipping coffee and listening to the low hum of conversation around us. Then Eva said, you know, you should be proud of yourself. I looked at her, confused. For what? Falling for a walking red flag? For getting out, she said. For not staying. For learning. That's harder than people think. I didn't say anything right away. I was too busy thinking about the version of me from a year ago, the one who triple-checked texts before sending them, who tried to read moods like weather reports, who spent nights apologizing for things he hadn't done just to feel safe in someone else's silence. That version of me wouldn't have recognized the man sitting here now. But I had to become him the hard way. Peace is weird, I said eventually. It's not loud. It doesn't announce itself. It just shows up and stays. Eva smiled. Yeah, kind of like you did. We laughed then, really laughed. The kind that fills a room and makes strangers glance over with quiet envy. Later, walking her to her car, I realized I wasn't thinking about what came next. Not in an anxious way. Not in a calculating way. I just felt open, honest, grounded. Laura was a chapter. One that burned at the edges and taught me what not to mistake for love. But Eva reminded me what calm looked like. What healthy could feel like. what it meant to just be. And that, more than anything, felt like healing.